That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Life of Chuck, the 8th film directed by Mike Flanagan, which premiered at the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival, where it won the People's Choice Awards, which, as everybody knows, generally means probably going to get Oscar nominations according to historical data. Neon is releasing it June 6th, 2025.
Did Mike Flanagan do those new Halloween movies?
No, you're thinking of David Gordon Green.
Oh, who's Mike Flanagan?
You have seen several Mike Flanagan films, including Oculus and Ouija, Origin of Evil. He's kind of become the go-to master of the Stephen King adaptation with Gerald's Game. You liked Dr. Sleep, as I recall.
I did. What is The Life of Chuck about? The story unfolds in reverse, beginning with a cosmic apocalypse linked to the death of Chuck Krantz. As the narrative moves backward, it reveals Chuck's final joyful moments, his middle-aged years, and his childhood experiences with his grandparents. The film explores how an ordinary life can have extraordinary cosmic significance. What is your pull quote?
A bittersweet rumination on life, time, and our minuscule moment in the cosmos. The life of Chuck isn't so much profound as it is a reminder to live, laugh, love.
Mine. The Life of Chuck has beautiful moments, but feels a bit too schmaltzy and kooky to transcend YA territory. I did like this movie.
I liked moments of this movie.
We saw the trailer, because we had to pay to see a few movies last month, so I saw this trailer like 3 times. And I was expecting to need like a box of Kleenex.
I was expecting to be sobbing based on how this was marketed. And
this film never took me there.
But you know what? I straight up forgot that I read the novella that's in the collection, If It Bleeds.
Which is the same collection that has
Mr. Harrigan's Phone, which is terrible. But in fact, I remember mostly the references that the boy is reading to Mr. Harrigan in that Stephen King compilation. Anyhow.
The premise I read is pretty much the story. The only thing I don't agree with is we don't get... The story stops. It's like him as a little boy up until the age of like 17. And then we meet him again at 39, where he's rapidly dying of like a brain tumor. And like the premise said, the story unfolds in reverse. So it's in 3 acts. So it starts with Act 3, called Thanks Chuck. And that's like the apocalypse. And we really focus on Chiwetel Ejiofor and
Karen Gillan.
And their ex-spouses dealing with what seems like the end of the world. But sprinkled throughout this experience over like, 25, 30 minutes, we keep seeing all these ads for... it's basically like a retirement ad for Chuck Krantz. Thank you for 39 years. And it looks like, it's Tom Hiddleston sitting at a desk looking like an accountant. And no one knows who this person is. Like everyone in this world does not know who this person is. And the first act, which is Act 3, was really depressing. So I thought we were going to get something very different. Because basically talking about how, just all these tragedies are culminating at once to create the end of the world. But then you get glimpses of like, oh, this seems kind of fantastical because we keep seeing all these ads for Chuck Krantz. And I leaned over to you and said, oh, this seems like maybe we're inside of someone's video game. But it's not. It's just supposed to be like this person at the end of their life, maybe like their life flashing before them, or like an abstract representation of what their life was.
I think it's like Wizard of Oz, which I think is a direct reference because Carl Lumley calls Chuck Krantz the Oz of the apocalypse.
Yes.
So I think that's all very much on Stephen King's mind. Under the Dome also has some similarities, I think, with this.
Act 2 is called Buskers Forever, and that's an extended, basically, dance sequence where we see Tom Hiddleston at the age of 39. He's in some town.
He's on a work conference. He's
at a work conference.
An accountant's conference.
And there's this woman playing the drums.
The Pocket Queen. That's her name.
And Tom Hiddleston walks towards her playing the drums and decides to dance. And he dances with this other woman. And then we learn that it seems like it was kind of his dream to dance, but instead he became an accountant. And so he doesn't know why he decided to do this, but he did. And then...
Well, it awoke a memory in him.
Right, and we don't really understand that until Act 1, the final act of the film, which is called I Contain Multitudes, which is a reference to
Walt Whitman's Song of Myself.
But it's the Act 1, the final act, where we meet Chuck Krantz as a little boy. And we get 3 different young actors playing him. But what do we learn about Chuck Krantz? He had a traumatic childhood.
Yes.
Which I think is kind of shocking in that this feels so, like, gingerly handled for a person who experienced so much tragedy as a young person. Because we find out that when he was maybe like 4 or 5, his parents died in a tragic car accident.
I think they said 7.
Oh, 7? Along with his like unborn sister. They all died. So then he was raised by his grandparents. And of course, they lived in this house of, like, the grandparents were depressed. The grandfather took to like becoming an alcoholic. Then we find out that his grandmother, who was very kind to him, died when he was maybe like 15. Mm-hmm. And then his grandfather died when he was 17. That's a lot of tragedy.
It is. Based on the presentation of Chuck here, I'd say there was some heavy compartmentalization going on.
But during that period, that's where he develops his love for dance from his grandmother. But then his grandfather, who was also an accountant, sort of helped him understand that he needs to do something that's practical, that he can support himself with. There are some beautiful moments that we'll get back to, but one of them is his grandfather talking about the importance of math.
Mark Hamill. Mm-hmm.
Played by Mark Hamill. We need to talk about some of this casting, but ultimately we see that he decides to go off to college, become an accountant. We don't get anything past 17, and then we sort of wrap up the story with being told that he died of a brain tumor, or from a brain tumor.
So essentially we were only getting 2 integral moments in Chuck's life. I'd say the twin dance moments.
Yeah.
And then what's inside his deteriorating mind. So we really don't get to know much about the life of Chuck.
No, not at all. And then me referencing the story being kooky revolves around Mark Hamill is the grandfather. The house that they live in, there's a cupola, which I didn't know that word until I saw this movie. But it's like in these Victorian homes, that part of the home that looks like a tower, like where Rapunzel is, that's a room. So the stairwell goes up to that room. In their house, Mark Hamill has that room locked.
Locked tight.
Locked tight. And he is acting like the devil is in there. And so there's this supernatural component to the story where the grandfather believes that like he has premonitions of death, and that when he looks in that room, he predicted the death of like a friend, another friend's suicide, his wife, and then maybe even himself. That kind of took me out. I felt like that was too much. But then you said if you didn't know this was a Stephen King property, you would have known pretty quickly.
You'd be like, oh yeah, this is pretty, especially late period Stephen King, which I don't mean to sound shady, but I kind of am. Yeah.
I thought that took away from the more meaningful nature of the story.
He always kind of has that angle, even Stand By Me, Hearts in Atlantis, like that's always ever present. I mean, I don't think Stephen King can help himself without kind of having that, his version of, magical realism.
I don't have a lot of notes because I feel like we really don't, the opening act, Act 3, would have you think that this is going to be some Christopher Nolan nonsense, it's some overly complicated, but then you realize, no, it's just this person's sort of life flashing before them in an abstract way.
I like the conceit of, I contain multitudes in myself. So everything I've encountered is inside my brain. It's in my mind. So it's a part of me. And that, as you're deteriorating, all gets kind of jumbled up in a weird way. And giving those things like sentient life, I think, shoves this in a sentimental territory that at the end of it, I don't know that I really needed that part.
No. Well, you know what this movie made me think of, although I like this movie better, is the film Here.
Yes, the Zemeckis.
Yeah. Okay. The first moment that I thought was really beautiful is in Act 3, the opening. Chiwetel Ejiofor's wife calls him on the phone and she's scared because of all the things that are happening. And that's when Chiwetel talks to her about the cosmic calendar. Mm-hmm. And basically it's this idea that like if the universe was created 15 billion years ago. If we took that 15 billion years and put it into like our calendar, like our 12-month calendar, the period where like the history of humanity that we know it would only be like the final couple seconds of the entire calendar, like December 31st at 11:59
in 35 seconds.
In 35 seconds, that would be like when man first inhabited the planet. And so really like our time on this planet is so insignificant. And the message I took away from this film was that, because obviously this idea that Chuck dies at the age of 39 seems so early, but it's like, if you knew how long you were going to live, would it matter? Like, shouldn't you just live every day like it's your last?
Or meaningfully. As you are able to, yeah.
But then my problem a little bit is that I never got the sense of what Chuck wanted. I see that there's some regret in that maybe he didn't dance more, but I also didn't understand that how meaningful dance was to him. I understand the memory that he had in the 7th grade or whatever was a big memory.
And of grandma, yeah.
And of grandma, but like, I mean, I have some core memories that I think would be akin to that don't really, I also don't feel like those are things that I would have wanted to make my life or career. Mm-hmm. So, like you already said, I feel like I don't know enough about Chuck to have the movie be called The Life of Chuck.
And arguably maybe, you know, at the age of 39, which is not that old, he did not learn enough about himself yet either, but he still had a nice go of it. I think it's kind of about, it's not having what you want, it's wanting what you got. It's appreciating the moment.
What you're saying makes sense to me, but I don't even think I understand that Chuck had a nice go of it. I mean, he had a traumatic childhood and he's not that old, so only not that much time has passed.
He did, but there's also the other angle to look at is that he had very lovely grandparents, which a lot of people don't have. Like, again, that tragic things happened, but also good things happened.
This feels like a very simple story that you would show a teenager. Yes. Although I don't know what teenager would want to watch this, but that's the vibe I'm getting.
Well, whoever, because they put that pull quote in the trailer about comparing it to a modern It's a Wonderful Life, it does not get nearly as close to Capra as you would want it to be if that is what you're thinking when you go in. But there were things that I responded to, and maybe it was more of the casting, because seeing Mia Sara as the kindly grandma, like, kind of was tugging at my heartstrings, you know,
sure.
From Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Legend. And also, you clocked her before me, Heather Langenkamp.
Nancy from the Nightmare on Elm Street movie. She, actually, the funniest scene in the movie is with her because little Chuck is trying to get info on why his grandpa won't open up the cupola. Mm-hmm. But he won't tell. But the grandpa likes to drink. So Chuck has learned that if I wait until grandpa gets drunk enough, he might give me a little extra tea. So one night grandpa does spill a little bit too much. It's so the next morning or whatever it is, the grandma's making muffins for Heather Langenkamp's character. And Chuck's smart enough to go, oh, can I take them to her? Mm-hmm. Would you? She would love that. But his little sneaky ass goes over there and he basically wants to ask her about some of the stuff her grandfather said. And that lady is gossipy as hell.
Oh, yeah. He gets her cranked up. Mm-hmm.
And I thought she was really funny. But that's a good segue to, so they put old lady makeup on Heather Langenkamp. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was cute on her, but Mark Hamill is the grandfather. I don't know. Something about that seemed off. The entire time I kept thinking to myself, this is someone with old man makeup on.
Sure.
So are we going to see him young again?
No.
But we don't. And I don't know what Mark Hamill looks like today without the makeup. But something about that characterization was really off to me. Also, his grandfather is like a lush. And then after the grandmother dies, then we cut to him seeming like he's totally on the wagon.
I think he's a functional alcoholic, really.
Okay, another really cool scene is when, like during Act 2, when Tom Hiddleston is dancing.
I did like that scene.
But it reminded me of, there are a couple of scenes of Tom Hiddleston on talk shows, like I think like Tonight with Jimmy Fallon or something, where he's dancing, or the Graham Norton show where he dances, and he's doing the exact same dance. So I think he has like a dance he does. So watching him do that dance in this, it was still cute, but it made me think like, if we didn't have that, because how long is it? Like 10 minutes? Mm-hmm. It's a very long dance sequence, which was lovely. But without that,
Well, I think it's beyond the dancing. It's the intention and kind of like, how music brings the people together. like that is what feels kind of
But what I'm
magical.
saying is if we didn't have that scene, I just feel like there wouldn't be much life to Chuck as an adult.
No, that is it. That is essentially
Like that's
it.
all we get. So it felt a little, I mean, maybe my expectations were not set correctly because I hadn't read the short story and I had watched that trailer too many times. That being said, I really did like the younger iterations of Chuck.
Like many Stephen King properties, the emotional core is with the troubled childhood. Not unlike, I think Spielberg, does sometimes quite well, is he gets kind of the essence of what into how you tap into what it felt like, remembering your childhood and all the good and the bad things. Like, Stephen King, who used to be a teacher, like he was a teacher when he wrote Carrie. That's how he knew how miserable high school students were. He gets that bond that you can have with teachers very well. And there are two here. There's the physical education teacher, who's the dance instructor, played by Samantha Sloyan, who I liked. And then Flanagan's own wife, Kate Siegel, playing Miss Richards, who on the very last day of class is reading the Whitman poem. And that's where we get an interpretation of what it means to contain multitudes. And I liked that. Although I find it interesting that I think Miss Richards should have been played by the Pocket Queen, because we don't ever see her again.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe I missed her.
Well, no, because I didn't catch her either. I do think there's some, because even like Chiwetel's character, I kind of feel like we do see him in Act 1 as one of the teachers at Chuck's school, but they never have an interaction. So it does feel a little disjointed, but I mean, that's kind of how dreams work, right? Like, so I would imagine if Act 3 is like an abstract representation of what this person might think of their life as they're dying. Like, I guess there would be fragments that don't quite connect the way you think.
Yeah.
So, but I agree with that critique. Other beautiful moments, the grandmother is obviously very upset after the death of her child, her son, her daughter-in-law, and the unborn grandchild. So we see that for several years the grandma is in darkness. But then one day just decides to snap out of it, and we see that cooking brings her joy, and that listening to contemporary rock music brings her joy. And so in the trailer, when you see her dancing, that's what it is. And then she introduces little Chuck to dancing, and we get a beautiful montage of them dancing, and then we get another montage of them watching musicals, like Singing in the Rain, Cabaret, that I thought was really sweet.
Yes, all that jazz, yeah.
I think it's during All That Jazz that there must be like a nude scene.
You've seen All That Jazz.
Where she covers his eyes, which I thought was really cute. And then you already mentioned it, but the PE teacher doubles as the dance teacher for the after school activity or club, which is called Twirlers and Spinners. And that was really cute because you see young Chuck take up that hobby or activity. And then there's a young lady who's a grade above him and is also like a foot taller. And she's like the popular girl and the best dancer. And they develop a little relationship. But she's dating someone else. So she only likes Chuck because he's a good dancer and a sweet kid. And she encourages him to put on a show at like the school dance. I thought that was a sweet moment.
It's sweet. Again, though, that it's like the film comes very close to kind of sending at least myself over the edge emotionally, and it never really
No, it doesn't,
there.
because because then right before the dance happens, we get the really, I think, lovely scene of the grandfather explaining the importance of math. I thought that was well written. So then I thought, I'm not quite clear. But then also it's like I wasn't clear if the grandfather's saying like, you can enjoy dancing, but you need to make math your career. He didn't really end it with anything except like, you're good at math, you should do that. But then we see little Chuck go to the dance, and then all of a sudden now he's like...
I think that moment put it into his head that maybe it made him self-aware, almost.
So then he doesn't want to dance, and he's pretending he has a hurt leg, but then he goes outside and sees a shooting star, and then the constellations in the sky play a big part in Act 3. So it's all tied together, but that inspires him to go back inside and dance, and then it's like the hit parade. All the kids are like congratulating the two of them because they did a great job. And then I thought a really one of the better moments that I think resonated with me is on that night of the dance when he was like in the 7th grade, he cut his hand bad enough that he still has this scar as a 39-year-old. And we find out that he told his wife he got that scar because the young lady who he danced with, her older, bigger boyfriend was jealous and beat him up. But that's not true. He actually, after that moment of the dance, he was so excited he wanted to go outside and get some fresh air. And he was dancing around and cut his hand on a fence. But I thought the beautiful thing is that the narrator, which we need to get to, says that that moment was so special to him that he felt like he had to make up a story that lived up to the moment, even though it wasn't true. And I think that is the one moment in this film that hit me the hardest.
Because he's also deteriorating and he can't articulate it at that point.
Yeah. But the narrator, Nick Offerman, I wrote down that the narrator's talking too damn much.
It is.
It's a lot.
It's heavily relying on it, and I think that's keeping Stephen King's essence intact, but I don't know that we need it per se. But I like his voice. I find him very wry. But yes, I do think at times it kind of detracts because there's a lot of it.
I would recommend this movie. I think it's lovely.
In the beginning, again, by the time you get to the end of it, I feel like I just wish I could lop off the first act. I like the idea of it. I just don't think it works as well with the other two.
I also think it's the most schmaltzy of the three.
It is. And maybe if it had been incorporated not as this first chunk, but maybe woven throughout, I would have liked that more. Because these people, are having, desperate, terrible things are happening. And then they're all concerned about this man on the billboards. It's like Atlas Shrugged and everybody's going, who's John Galt? It's like, nobody's paying attention to what's going on. They have no internet.
What would you give The Life of Chuck?
I'm going to give it a 3.
I did enjoy it, and I could see a lot of people getting something from it. I would give it 3 out of 5. Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.